At the family court hearing, my mother stood up, looked directly at the judge, and said I was mentally unstable, that I could not be trusted to manage my own inheritance. She didn't hesitate. She didn't soften it. She said it like she was stating a medical fact. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 30 years old. And that morning, I sat in a courtroom listening to my own mother try to convince a judge that I wasn't capable of handling the money my father left me. The courtroom was quiet in the way serious rooms always are. Polished wooden benches, a clock ticking too loudly. My lawyer sat beside me, calm and focused. My mother sat across the aisle, hands folded neatly, dressed in soft colors like she was attending church. She looked composed, concerned, almost protective. My daughter has a history of emotional instability, she told the judge. I'm not trying to take anything from her. I'm trying to protect her. Protect me. That word almost made me laugh. 2 years earlier, my father had passed away unexpectedly. In his will, he left his business shares and savings directly to me, not jointly, not in trust, directly. My mother was not pleased. She had assumed everything would pass through her first. She had assumed she would manage it. Instead, my father wrote clearly that I was to inherit independently. A month after probate closed, she filed a petition claiming I was not mentally competent to manage the inheritance. She requested financial guardianship, meaning she would control everything legally. When I first saw the paperwork, I felt like I was reading about someone else. History of depression, impulsive employment decisions, emotional volatility. Yes, I had struggled during college. After my father's first heart attack, I went through a difficult period. I saw a therapist. I took time off school. I recovered. But I recovered. And that was the part she left out. In the courtroom, she spoke calmly. She has made unstable decisions in the past, my mother continued. I fear a large inheritance could worsen her condition. The judge looked at me. Ms. Carter, do you wish to respond? I stood slowly. My hands were steady. I had prepared for this moment. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I struggled with depression 7 years ago after a family medical crisis. I sought treatment voluntarily. I completed therapy. I have had no relapses. I have been employed full-time for 4 years and manage my own finances without issue. My mother shifted in her seat. Her lawyer leaned forward. Your Honor, he said smoothly, mental health conditions can resurface under financial stress. My client is merely seeking precautionary oversight. Precautionary oversight. That's what they were calling control. The judge turned to my mother. Do you have medical documentation supporting your claim of current instability? She hesitated for the first time. Well, she began, she has always been sensitive. Sensitive. I felt something settle inside me. This wasn't about concern. This was about power. She couldn't accept that my father trusted me directly. She couldn't accept losing control of the money. So she tried to frame my past vulnerability as permanent incapacity. What she didn't know was that months ago, when I first suspected she might try something like this, I had quietly requested a full psychiatric evaluation from an independent specialist. I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone except my lawyer. The judge turned back to me. Ms. Carter, has there been any recent medical evaluation? My lawyer stood before I could answer. Yes, Your Honor. My client underwent a comprehensive psychiatric assessment 3 months ago. We would like to submit the report into evidence. My mother's head snapped toward us. What report? She whispered under her breath. My lawyer handed the document to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The room grew very still. The judge adjusted his glasses and began reading silently. My mother sat straighter, confidence slowly draining from her posture. For the first time that morning, she didn't look composed. She looked uncertain, and I knew, in that moment, that the silence about to fill that courtroom would change everything, while the judge reviewed the report. My mother's lawyer stood up again, as if he could still control the direction of the room. Your Honor, he said smoothly. A single evaluation does not erase a documented history. Ms. Carter withdrew from university for a semester. She resigned from a previous position abruptly. There are patterns of instability. Patterns. That word sounded heavy, permanent. The judge looked at me again. Is that accurate, Ms. Carter? Yes, I said calmly. I withdrew from school 7 years ago after my father's first heart attack. I was overwhelmed. I sought therapy and returned the following semester. I graduated on time. And your employment history? I resigned from a job 3 years ago, I replied. Because the company was under investigation for fraud, I chose not to stay. A few quiet murmurs moved through the courtroom. My mother avoided my eyes. The way she described those moments made them sound reckless, dramatic, out of control. But they weren't. They were difficult decisions I made when I was young, and I handled them responsibly. She was trying to turn growth into weakness. My concern, my mother said, her voice soft but deliberate, is that Evelyn does not handle pressure well. A sudden inheritance of this size could be harmful. Harmful, as if money itself would break me. What she didn't mention was that I had been managing my own apartment lease for 5 years. I paid my bills on time. I filed my taxes independently. I had built savings of my own before my father passed away. None of that fit her narrative. The judge finally looked up from the report in his hands. Ms. Carter, he said to my mother, this evaluation indicates no cognitive impairment, no active mood disorder, and no signs of diminished decision-making capacity. The air shifted. My mother blinked. Your Honor, her lawyer interjected quickly, mental health can fluctuate. We are requesting guardianship out of caution. The judge raised a hand, silencing him. This report was conducted by a court-certified psychiatrist, he said. It states clearly that Ms. Evelyn Carter is fully competent to manage financial assets. Fully competent. The words settled into the room like something solid. For the first time, my mother's composure cracked. She's always been emotional, she insisted, her voice tighter now. She takes things personally. Emotional does not equal incompetent. The judge replied calmly. The courtroom went completely still. My mother's attempt to reframe my past as evidence of permanent instability was unraveling. She had expected me to defend myself with words. She hadn't expected documentation. My lawyer stepped forward again. Your Honor, we would also like to note that Ms. Carter voluntarily requested this evaluation months ago, anticipating concerns regarding her mental health might be raised. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. You anticipated this petition? He asked me. Yes, I answered honestly. And why was that? I took a breath. Because my father left his estate directly to me, I said. And my mother disagreed with that decision. The truth was simple. This wasn't about my mental health. It was about control. The judge nodded slowly. Very well, he said. We will proceed. Across the aisle, my mother sat rigid, her hands no longer folded neatly. The calm, protective image she had presented at the start of the hearing was fading. She had walked into that courtroom confident that my past struggles would define me. Instead, they showed something else. That when I struggled, I sought help. That when I faced pressure, I acted responsibly. That I was not unstable. I was resilient. And the silence that followed the judge's reading of that report wasn't just quiet. It was recognition. For the first time that morning, I wasn't defending myself. I was being acknowledged. And the direction of the case had just changed. After the judge finished reviewing the psychiatric report, the room felt different. The tension had shifted. It was no longer about my mental health. It was about why this case was even here. The judge placed the report down carefully and looked toward my mother. Ms. Carter, he said evenly, based on this evaluation, the court sees no medical basis for declaring your daughter incompetent. My mother's lawyer leaned in and whispered something to her. She nodded, but her expression had lost the confidence she walked in with. This is not about incompetence, she said quickly. It's about protection. My husband's estate is significant. I don't want my daughter making decisions she might regret. There it was again. Protection. But my father had already made his decision clear. He didn't leave the estate in a shared trust. He didn't appoint my mother as co-manager. He wrote in plain language that the assets were to transfer directly to me upon his death. That detail mattered. Your Honor, my lawyer said, if I may clarify something for the court. The judge nodded. The deceased specifically structured his will to bypass spousal oversight. The estate was intentionally granted solely to Ms. Evelyn Carter, with no conditions requiring guardianship. The words hung in the air. Intentionally. Bypass. My mother's jaw tightened. She hadn't expected that phrasing to be emphasized. The judge turned to her. Are you contesting the validity of the will? He asked. No, she replied quickly. I'm questioning my daughter's ability to manage what was given to her. The judge leaned back slightly. And you have no current medical documentation supporting that concern. She hesitated. No. The courtroom was silent again. But this time, the silence felt heavier. It wasn't about whether I was stable anymore. It was about whether she was trying to override my father's decision. My lawyer spoke again, his tone calm but firm. Your Honor, this petition effectively attempts to gain financial control over assets that were deliberately assigned to my client. There is no evidence of incapacity. There is, however, a clear financial interest. That last phrase landed sharply. Financial interest. My mother shifted in her seat. This is my family, she said, her voice rising slightly. I have a right to ensure it's handled responsibly. You have a right to contest through legal channels, the judge replied, but not without evidence. For the first time since the hearing began, I saw something close to panic cross her face. She hadn't expected the conversation to turn toward motive. She had expected the focus to stay on me, my past, my emotions, my supposed instability. But the report changed the direction. It exposed that there was nothing medically wrong, which meant the only remaining question was this. Why was she pushing so hard? The judge folded his hands. Ms. Carter, he said to my mother, is there any additional evidence you wish to present? She looked at her lawyer again. He gave a small shake of his head. No, Your Honor, she said quietly. The word no echoed more than any accusation had earlier, because it meant she had nothing. No diagnosis, no professional opinion, no proof, only fear of losing control. I sat there, breathing steadily, feeling something inside me settle. This wasn't about proving I was healthy anymore. It was about recognizing that the court could see what this truly was. An attempt to rewrite my father's final decision. And that realization changed the power in the room completely. The judge sat quietly for a moment, reviewing the file one last time. No one in the courtroom spoke. Even the air felt heavy. When he finally looked up, his voice was steady and clear. This court finds no evidence that Ms. Evelyn Carter lacks the mental capacity to manage her own inheritance. My mother's shoulders stiffened. The psychiatric evaluation submitted is comprehensive and recent. It confirms full cognitive competence and emotional stability. He paused, letting the words settle. Therefore, the petition for financial guardianship is denied. Denied. It was a simple word, but it carried weight. My mother's face went pale. The judge continued. Furthermore, the court notes that filing for guardianship without sufficient medical basis may be considered an inappropriate use of legal process. I advise caution before pursuing further action. The warning was polite, but it was unmistakable. This wasn't just a loss. It was a public correction. My mother tried to speak. Your Honor, I was only trying to protect. The matter is resolved. The judge interrupted calmly. There was nothing left to argue, no evidence to introduce, no story to reshape. The gavel struck once, and it was over. I didn't feel the rush of triumph I thought I might. I didn't feel anger either. What I felt was steady, like something that had been shaking inside me for months had finally stopped. My lawyer leaned toward me. It's done, he said quietly. Across the aisle, My mother remained seated for a moment longer. Her carefully built image of concern and protection had collapsed in front of a judge who required proof, not emotion. She had tried to label me unstable. She had tried to use my past struggles as a permanent weakness. Instead, the official record now said something else. Fully competent, emotionally stable, capable. I stood up slowly and gathered my bag. For a second, I considered looking at her, saying something sharp, something final, but there was nothing left to say. The ruling had already spoken. As I walked past her row, she finally looked up at me. There was no anger in her eyes now, no performance, only something quieter, regret, maybe, or the realization that control had slipped out of her hands. I didn't stop. I walked through the courtroom doors into the hallway, where the air felt lighter and less tense. My phone buzzed with a message from a friend who had known about the hearing. How did it go? I typed back one word. Free, because that's what it felt like. Not just free from her petition, free from the narrative that I was fragile, free from the idea that my past defined my future, free from needing to defend myself against something that was never true. She tried to prove I was unstable. The only unstable thing in that courtroom was her accusation. And when I stepped outside into the daylight, inheritance intact, and name cleared, I understood something clearly. My father trusted me for a reason, and now, the court did too. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt strangely quiet. People moved around us, lawyers with folders, families waiting for their turn, but everything sounded distant to me. It wasn't relief that hit first. It was clarity. My mother walked out a few seconds after I did. For the first time that morning, she didn't look composed. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, her steps slower. She stopped a few feet away from me. I was trying to protect you, she said quietly. The words didn't sound convincing anymore. You were trying to control me, I replied calmly. There was no anger in my voice, no bitterness, just truth. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. I thought the money would overwhelm you, she said. You've always been sensitive. I was depressed once, I answered. I wasn't incapable. That distinction mattered. She looked down at her hands. You don't understand how much pressure this is, she murmured. I understand it better than you think, I said. That's why Dad trusted me. Her expression tightened at that. My father's will had been deliberate. He didn't leave me money by accident. He didn't forget to include her. He made a choice. And today, the court respected it. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I know, I replied. And I did. That was the complicated part. She hadn't woken up one morning deciding to destroy me. She had convinced herself that control was protection, that taking over was caring, that questioning my stability was responsibility. But intent doesn't erase impact. You stood in court and told a judge I wasn't mentally stable, I said softly. That doesn't disappear. She swallowed. I was afraid you'd make mistakes. I will make mistakes, I said. But they'll be mine. That was the point. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was autonomy. It was my father's belief that I could handle my own life, even when it was hard. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked quietly, What happens now? Now, I said. I manage what Dad left me, and you let me. There was no threat in it, just a boundary. She nodded slowly. I suppose I don't have a choice. You had one, I replied gently. You just didn't like it. Her eyes met mine then, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not superiority, loss. Because what she really lost today wasn't the case. It was control, and maybe that was harder. I hope you don't shut me out, she said. I'm not shutting you out, I answered. I'm just not handing you the keys. The difference mattered. My lawyer stepped out into the hallway and gave me a small nod. Everything was finalized, the petition dismissed, my inheritance secure. I turned back to my mother one last time. I'm not unstable, I said calmly. I'm independent. And then I walked toward the exit. No raised voice, no dramatic confrontation, no victory speech. Just steady steps. When the courthouse doors opened and sunlight hit my face, I felt something settle inside me. She had tried to define me by my lowest season. The judge defined me by evidence, and the evidence said I was capable. My father trusted me. The court confirmed it. And for the first time since he passed away, I felt like the life he prepared me for was truly mine to live, fully, independently, and without permission.